Hi guys, so today we're going to take a look at the Passe Simple. This is a bit of a tricky verb tense because we don't tend to actively use it. We might see it, we might read it, you might occasionally hear somebody say it, like in a very formal speech, but it's really not something that we tend to reproduce or make on our own, making it really quite rare, and so as a result quite challenging because we're just not used to seeing it, you're not used to hearing it, so the exposure there is not as high, it's not as great. So the Passe Simple, it's actually really interesting. There's this book that I was reading, can't remember what it's called, but it's a really good book. I recommend it. Anyways, it was this linguist, and she was going all about the French language and the history of it. And what's really interesting is that when the Passe Simple was first used, it was used in conjunction with the Passe Composé. The two of them were used side by side. Like people could use them, they could, I don't even know what I'm trying to say here. They would use them both regularly, not concurrently, but you know what I mean. And what's really funny is that the Passe Simple is a bit of a misnomer. It really should be called like the Passe I hate you because it's such a horrible verb tense. And that's actually what happened, is that in about like the 17th or 18th century, French people, like the users of the language, found the Passe Simple so hard that they just stopped saying it. That's why it's only a written verb tense today. Because I was wondering, I was like, why do we have a verb tense only for books? Like it seems a little bit secretive, like Harry Potter, like why? Why is it only for books? But anyways, so at one point it was spoken by people, but French people found it too complicated, and so they just stopped using it. So I guess maybe when they're writing a book, they can be like, what was that ending again? Oh, okay. And they can look it up, then they write it down. But people don't say it anymore because it's too challenging. Like it's kind of funny that even French people are like, I'm not using it. This is too hard. So anyways, so the Passe Simple is basically just, you're only going to read it. I mean, you could write it if you're writing it to be in a book, but you're not going to like write a letter to your friend to be like, last weekend I went to the store and used the Passe Simple. It's not really meant for that. I mean, you could, but that would be like, what are you doing? Okay, so to make the Passe Simple, here's a few basic rules. You have the entire verb, and then you drop off the last two endings, or the last two letters. And then and then you take those two letters off, and then you put on these new letters. So it's actually not too bad. So whether it's ER, IR, RE, you just take off the last two letters, and they've got some basic standard endings that go on. So I'm just going to read this out. I'm not going to write all this out. For ER verbs, like the endings, it's like AI, ASA, which looks kind of familiar because that comes from avoir. But then we have like AMES, ATES, ERENT. And so you're like, where do those come from? Yeah, left field. You have to memorize them. There's nothing logical about those. They're just kind of odd. The nice thing though is that you don't really see these letter patterns anywhere else. So if you see them, you can be like, oh, that is clearly Passe Simple. For IR and RE, what they get is they get IS, ISIT. So again, it looks just like a choisir, an IR verb in the present tense. But then all of a sudden it's like IMES, ITES, IRENT. Like again, combinations that we don't see anywhere else. So that's kind of nice. We have a few verbs where the spelling changes a little bit, but you've seen that before. Like in manger, we get like an extra E in there in different verb tenses. And then like lancer because of the accent and stuff. So generally the exceptions in like the passé composé and the imparfait, they tend to be similar sort of exceptions here. Some more exceptions, whatever. We then have some verb tenses, some verbs that are just weird, like they don't follow a pattern, which you're used to seeing exceptions where instead of like avoir, instead of just taking like off IR, it is, you know, it's going to be new, it's going to be a whole different word. And so we have a list here, and I'm not going to read it out, you guys can look at this on your own time. I'm just trying to explain what the Passe Simple is and how generally to use it. So again, remember, most ER, IR, RA verbs, you take off the ER, the IR, the RE, and you put on the new endings. That's kind of it. These verbs here are our exceptions. Instead of taking off two letters and putting on something new, you might take off more than two, put on something new. And all of these here have very specific, right here, very specific endings that go onto them. So it's not like an IR verb, even if it's an irregular, you put on an IR ending. Like they're very different endings. And so a typical, for example, like to have, and even the pronunciation looks a little bit weird. Like you look at it and you're like, EUS, like use, like what is that? But if I wanted to say like, I had a dog and I'm writing in a book and it's like very literary, I'm going to like, j'eus un chien. Or like, nous eûmes un chien. So anyways, this is the Passe Simple. It really is. You just have to sit down and memorize. There's nothing super logical about it. There's a little bit of pattern to follow, which is kind of nice, but definitely a lot of exception and just a lot of stuff that we're just not used to seeing, making it a little awkward, and it's hard for us to put it together if we're not used to seeing it so much. But anyways, yeah, something you're going to see more in writing, maybe in speeches, but definitely not in day-to-day conversation on the streets. So making it a tricky verb tense. All right. I hope that helps. Thanks.